Welcome to New York's number two sports show. The New York Yankees lose 2 of 3 to the San Francisco Giants at Yankee Stadium. And it was their first rubber game of the season in the fifth series of the season. And they lose it. Final score in the third game was San Francisco 5, Yankees 4, a game in which they really should have won, and Carlos Rodón was unable to hold the lead. Uh, Game one was a disaster where weather was awful. They end up calling the game in the sixth inning, but Marcus Stroman doesn't make it out of the first inning, and subsequently he ends up on the IL with left knee inflammation. It doesn't sound like it's going to be anything long term, but Stroman's season has been a disaster to this point, and not a major surprise given what we saw from him in the second half of last year. But in terms of the recency of it, and in terms of really what's more important in the long run, is the Rodon stuff is very, very frustrating. The loss puts him at 1-3 with a 5.48 ERA. Uh, does he have good stuff? Yes. As far as him harnessing it and really being a pitcher, I feel like, he's more of a thrower than a pitcher as far as him executing and putting up the right game plan. It just seems like, there are points in a game where he can mow the opponent down and look good doing so, but it's just he's not a guy that you really fully trust, or I don't. And I know it's early in the season. I'm also aware of last year. It wasn't like it was completely awful, but this was someone that was brought in on a 6-year deal, ironically, formerly of the San Francisco Giants. And I just don't, I mean, this is a guy that you really need. This is a key component to this rotation with given the injuries. And he is sadly, unequivocally your number two starter right now. And he is not pitching that way. And, you know, the Yankees did have a nice outing, if you will, against Logan Webb. Now, Webb was able to strand some Yankee runners a little later on in his outing, and that was costly to the Yankees. That they were not able to tack on up 3-0, up 3-1. They were unable to do so, and that really did hurt them. So the offense is not blameless here. This loss was reminiscent to the one they had against Arizona, the first game against the Diamondbacks, where that was Corbin Burns against Will Warren. Difference there is that um, the Yankee bullpen is the one that blew that, whereas this was Rodon. And in both cases, though, the offense essentially got shut down against the bullpen. No doubt about that. And Jazz Chisholm Jr., who going into that at bat was just about 0 for his last 24, give or take. He had homered, actually. And that was really the only hit they got in the last at least 4 innings of action. So disappointing. Yankees are now 8-7, which is, look, that is what it is. You really you don't want to be in a position where you have a horrible record. The Yankees are kind of trying to just tread water at this point, considering the fact that they do have a lot of significant injuries to the roster, and they'll get a little bit healthier. But we know how it goes, right? Certain players come back, then other players go on the shelf. So, in the American League East, as it stands in the loss column, all 5 teams are within 2 games. So no one is exactly jumping out in front of the pack here. And the Yankees haven't had any divisional games yet either. Those are going to be very, very important. And also the American League in general. There's wild card spots that are going to be up for grabs. So from the long run, from a playoff standpoint, and just in the standings view of things, I think that the Yankees they're all right. That's not the problem. But I just think with this team, this starting rotation, is going to be an issue. There's no way around it. Even with getting Clark Schmidt back on Wednesday, and even in saying, look, obviously you bring in Schmidt and you take out Stroman, definite improvement. But you still think about this rotation, you still have Carlos Carrasco in it, and that's someone that really should not be in a major league rotation. I hope that I'm proven wrong on that, but I think he was going to be the one that was going to be the odd man out. And due to this Stroman injury, it's kind of prolonged his stay with the team. What was a bright spot that we'll get into as we go through the games is Will Warren had a nice game too, but even still, there's going to be inconsistencies there. And really, like he is right now. I guess with Schmidt back, Warren is kind of your number 4, which still isn't ideal. But the Yankees definitely, this is, I don't see this being a juggernaut team, right? Despite the um, really amazing power display that we saw that first series against Milwaukee. Yeah, they have it in them. And honestly, like, the lineup at times looks like there is some depth to it, but also, as we're moving along here, there are certain players that don't really have great numbers. And we'll talk about those guys. Um, and if I feel like some of them can improve upon them, or some that, they could be in trouble for a while. And I kind of teased this a little bit last episode too, but um, I guess let's start from the top. And the one transaction that occurs involves Stroman. Um, and so I'll jump ahead on that. And Stroman, he goes in the IL. He's placed on it after the first game, and Alan Winans was recalled for him. Presumably, Winans will lose his roster spot once um, Clark Schmidt returns. So, fair enough. But for now, until then, until Wednesday, he'll be on the roster. We'll see if he appears again. He was someone that was with the Atlanta Braves, is a starter, and has had some decent AAA numbers, but it hasn't translated to the majors. So he was put on the roster. But as far as the first game, weather was awful. Yankees have had very bad weather throughout this season, whether it be in Detroit, whether it be in Pittsburgh, the games at Yankee Stadium. It's been cold, it's been windy, there's been rain, but somehow they've actually gotten all these games in. And I don't even really recall too many rain delays either. But the sloppiest of them all really ends up being this first game against San Francisco, which there was a delay to start, and they were not able to complete the 9 innings. And I think in part the lopsided nature of this game score wise ends up just making the decision all that much easier, right? I think if it were neck and neck, I don't know how this would have played out exactly, but it was just a very easy call, I think. And even still, it was taking longer than I think it should have. But the pitching matchup was the lefty Robbie Ray against Marcus Stroman. And, I don't know if the numbers bear this out, but I keep on thinking to myself again, I think left-handed pitching is going to give this lineup problems. And just based on the starters, at least in this series, Robbie Ray, um, did do that against the Yankees. And yes, there were 4 walks in 4 innings, which is a lot, but only 2 hits, 1 earned run, 7 strikeouts. And I know that the weather was problematic, but Marcus Stroman got absolutely annihilated on the other end. So there's not much you can say on that. As far as the Yankee lineup is concerned, you're kind of seeing a little bit of a theme here, where Goldschmidt leads off against lefties, Rice leads off against righties. Um, but the thing is, Rice was in the lineup batting second against lefties. Rice at this point is pretty much a mainstay to be up top in that lineup against lefties or righties at this point, and deservedly so, because the thing is, the other left-handers are not exactly doing much, whereas Rice is putting up more competitive at bats against either righties or lefties. Um, and then as well, what happened in the series, and this is another thing that makes sense, and I think they should probably stick to this as much as they can. Grisham started against the lefty, Dominguez against the righty, and both righties, Saturday, Sunday. And then, of course, you have the Peraza Cabrera platoon at third. I think that's something that they should probably just stick with for now, because I know at times they would have Grisham start against the righty and Dominguez would sit. It's a little unfair to Grisham to have him only have starts against the lefty. I get that, and that's not ideal. But given the state of this roster and the way it looks, I think that's probably the best way to go, because Grisham can hold his own versus lefties, and Dominguez, it's a drastic difference. Him being a switch hitter, he's much better from the left side. So, um, but this is all about Marcus Stroman. First inning, complete disaster. Uh, he basically he doesn't get out of the first inning. He gives up 5 runs. And there was a couple of really specifically big hits in the first, and Jung-Hoo Lee hits his first homer of the season. He was really the offensive star for San Francisco, by and large in this series, and it wasn't really close. This looks like an impressive player for San Francisco and a really key addition that they made before the 2024 season. So he hits a 3-run shot. And then 3 batters later, Lamont Wade Jr. with a 2-run double. So 6 batters, 5 runs, and a runner on second. Then Stroman gets a couple of outs, and then he gives up a single that doesn't score a run, and he's out of there. Ryan Yarbrough comes in, and Yarbrough was one of the few bright spots in this game. Really does a nice job of kind of settling things down. He finishes that first inning. And then at the bottom of the second, the Yankees do get a run. It was a Volpe leadoff walk and steal, and then after a Chisholm Jr. strikeout, Austin Wells, which off the bat it looked like a homer, but the elements got in the way and it goes up the top of the wall. It ends up being a double, an RBI double for Austin Wells to make it 5-1. And then after Peraza walks, Grisham and Goldschmidt fly out. Um, and then look, there were some other chances. Chisholm Jr. again on the third, cup 2 on, 2 out, he flies out. And then things get out of hand a bit in the fifth, where at this point, Yarborough's out of the game. And look, the line on Stroman was 2/3 of an inning, 4 hits, 5 runs, 3 walks, 1 strikeout. And it goes down as his first decision of the season. He's now 0-1. And then Yarborough, 2 2/3, 1 hit, 1 walk, 3 strikeouts, no runs allowed. So good job by him. And at this point, it would be Ian Hamilton that's in the game, and he starts out the fifth with a couple of walks. Then he strikes out Ramos, and they bring on Tim Hill, who then walks Wade Jr. So it's bases loaded, 1 out, and Wilmer Flores hits a high chop to Tim Hill. He opts to go to first, not home. So a run scores to make it 6-1, and then a wild pitch on the next batter makes it 7-1, and then an RBI double by Patrick Bailey makes it 8-1. So a bit of a rough go between Hamilton and Hill in that fifth. Now it's out of hand, and now it's an official game through 5. Yoendris Gomez comes out on the sixth, and he didn't have a good grip of the baseball. The rain's coming down harder and harder. He basically ends up walking the bases loaded, and it's bases loaded 2 out, and then he walks Lamont Wade Jr., and that would be the last batter of the game. I think Boone kind of just wanted this to be over with. Again, considering the score, the conditions were bad, and there were injury concerns, and so final score is San Francisco 9, Yankees 1 in 6 innings. So then we go to game 2, and it's a bit of a change in trend as the Yankees are able to win game 2 to set up the rubber game. In the previous 4 series of the season, the team that won game 1 won game 2. Well, not so much in this game, as Will Warren picks up his first major league win. And it was a good outing for him. 5 innings, 2 hits, 2 earned runs, 2 walks, and 6 strikeouts. And he would best Jordan Hicks, who picks up his first loss in the season. He goes 4 innings, 8 hits, 7 runs, 3 walks, 3 strikeouts. So a really impressive showing by the Yankee lineup in this game. Really up and down the lineup. They did a nice job as far as, and it really wasn't the home run ball. It was 1 home run by Ben Rice later in the game. But other than that, just really stringing some rallies together. So in the first inning, speaking of one of those, it would be a 1-out single for Judge, and then Cody Bellinger, who the struggles are still there for Bellinger. Game 2 was the one game where he made contributions, but still, you need a lot more from him. And he gets an RBI triple on a play where the left fielder Ramos, the ball was carrying, and he was unable to corral it. So it makes it 1-0 Yanks on the triple by Bellinger, and then Paul Goldschmidt with a sac fly to make it 2-0. But a quick response for San Francisco off of Will Warren as Wilmer Flores hits his 6th homer of the season. So an impressive start to the season for Flores, and that would be, again, a 2-run shot. 2s are wild, 2-2 in the second. And then things would settle down on the offensive side. Yankees had some opportunities to maybe get some things going, but were unable to do so against Hicks. But then they break through in the 5th. And it would be a Ben Rice single, Aaron Judge single, RBI single, Cody Bellinger, ground rule double for an RBI for Paul Goldschmidt, and then a walk to Jazz Chisholm Jr., which takes Jordan Hicks out of the game. So really, really impressive 5th inning. And then Randy Rodriguez comes in, and he's greeted by Anthony Volpe's sac fly. Then Austin Wells does strike out with 2nd and 3rd, but Jason Dominguez picks him up with a key 2-run single. That's the stuff you're looking for. That's what you needed in game 3. And so it goes from 5-2 to 7-2 right there. And then Fernando Cruz comes out in the 6th, replacing Warren. And not the cleanest of innings for him, although Jazz Chisholm Jr.'s throwing error did not help matters because it was runner on first, no out, and he's unable to make a clean throw to Volpe. Everyone's safe. And then Chapman walks, so it's bases loaded, no out. And then Cruz appears to maybe escape. He gets a couple of outs, but then Wilmer Flores is at it again. He gets a 2-run single to make it 7-4. So then they bring Luke Weaver on in the 6th inning, which that's the one good thing about like Weaver not being the 9th inning guy is it allows you to just freely bring Weaver into a big situation. It's Sam Huff's the tying run and Weaver strikes him out. And Weaver has that ability where even if it's not pretty, he just finds a way to get that key strikeout to get out of a jam. Then in the bottom of the sixth, Ben Rice hits his fourth homer of the year, a laser, uh, down the right field line off of former Yankee Lou Trevino to make it 8-4. And then in the seventh, it would be Luke Weaver to pitch the scoreless seventh inning, keep it at 8-4. And then in the top of the eighth, they would make a defensive change where Trent Grisham replaces Jason Dominguez, which we've seen, and Cody Bellinger moves from center to left. And then Mark Leiter Jr. Pitches the eighth, and there's a hit by pitch, there's a walk, and eventually it's 2 on, 2 out, but he gets Tyler Fitzgerald to fly out. Then we go to the top of the ninth, and Devin Williams, who has really not been very effective or productive with the Yankees so far. It's early, and it looked like it was going to be bad again. Leadoff walk, Yastrzemski, double for Willie Adames, makes it second and third, no out, but he's able to then do the job. He strikes out Lee, Chapman, and gets Ramos to round at the second. So, hopefully that can be something that Williams can feel good about. Again, it didn't start out well, but he did get out of it in impressive fashion. It's not as if he got lucky. He gets the strikeouts. He gets, a relatively soft ground ball. And the Yankees win 8-4 to set up the rubber match. Game 3, as I've discussed, Logan Webb against Carlos Rodón. And this was a game that looked like it was going to go the Yankees' way. And it didn't. And the Yankees would get on the board in the first. And just of note, J.C. Escarra would start this game. Austin Wells getting a blow. We would see him later in the game in a pinch hit appearance. But Carlos Rodón, his final line, if I didn't mention it before, 5 2/3 innings, 3 hits, 4 runs, 3 walks, and 8 strikeouts. So again, the walks, a problem. 3, too many. And those walks are leading to runs. And that was a key thing in that sixth inning. Walking Adames was highly detrimental. And then as far as Logan Webb is concerned, he ends up getting the unlikely win. He was down 3-0, but he goes just long enough to get the win. 5 innings, 5 hits, 3 runs, 4 walks, and 5 strikeouts. Again, there was traffic against Logan Webb, who is one of the best pitchers in baseball. Not someone the Yankees see often with him being in the National League, but they were doing the job. And in the first inning, they get going. An Aaron Judge double, and then with 2 out, a dunk opposite field RBI single for Paul Goldschmidt to make it 1-0 Yanks. And then in the bottom of the second, they were at it again. With 1 out, Dominguez double. RBI double J.C. Escarra, and that's his first major league RBI. And then with 2 out, Ben Rice goes opposite field, RBI single to knock Escarra in to make it 3-0. From there was a great catch by Luis Matos in right on Paul Goldschmidt. There's a chance it would have been a homer. I don't know for sure, but at least it would have been an extra base hit. Really nice catch to keep it at 3-0. And then Jung-Hoo Lee in the fourth hits the second homer of the season, second homer of the series to make it 3-1. At that point, it's okay. There's the customary Rodón home run. Solo shot. You don't like it. It's a problem for Rodón. It has been. He's allowed the most home runs in baseball since the start of last season. But it's only 3-1. But here's the biggest issues with the offense. In the fourth, walk Volpe, walk Dominguez, and J.C. Escarra pops out. And I know it's old school baseball, and I know that he doubled earlier. But, the thought of maybe a sacrifice there wouldn't have been the craziest thing in the world. But, you do have Oswaldo Cabrera coming up. And for better or worse, I know the Yankees aren't the highest on Oswaldo, so maybe you don't want to set up that situation. Although I wouldn't mind him in that spot necessarily. But Oswaldo grounds out, and then Ben Rice strikes out looking. So a big missed opportunity there. Then in the bottom of the fifth again, Judge walk, then Bellinger strikes out, and then Goldschmidt walks. First and second, 1 out. Jazz grounds out to set up a first and third 2-out situation. Then Volpe strikes out swinging. And I will say, in that inning, those 2-out strikeouts, not a great one by Rice, taking one that was just, I think, right down the middle, if I remember correctly. And then Volpe chasing one, which had some sweeper slider action that he went out and tried to get, and just not a good swing. So we go to the sixth inning, where in a game that really should have been a lot more lopsided than a 3-1 score. And it starts out in kind of a lucky way. Christian Koss gets his first major league hit, a single that goes off of Volpe. And, could Volpe make the play? Maybe. It was a little bit of a, kind of a cue shot over to him and goes down as a hit. Then Rodón does get Ramos to strike out looking, but then Willie Adames walks. That was the killer right there, and it sets them up for a spot. Matt Blake goes out to talk to Rodón, and he's unable to put Jung-Hoo Lee away. And on a 1-2 pitch on a curveball, which is Rodón, that's not a pitch that Rodón uses often. It's a 3-run shot, no doubt about it. Makes it 4-3. And right in that moment, you just knew that was the shift in the game, clearly, by them taking that lead. But just a terrible job by Rodón in that situation. He already gave a home run to him right before that. That's the last thing you can do. And he does it. So after a pop out to Wilmer Flores, Matt Chapman walks, and then that's all for Rodón. Mark Leiter Jr. would finish the inning. And then the Yankees get shut down by Hayden Birdsong, who replaced Logan Webb. A quick 1-2-3 in the sixth. In the seventh inning, unfortunately, bad fielding gets the better of the Yankees. And that's something that, they need to tighten up. Again, off of last season, they need to make sure that it's a lot better. And it has been, I'd say, in the early going. But it would be a Casey Schmidt double off Leiter Jr. And then after a strikeout by Bailey, Christian Koss reaches on an error by Paul Goldschmidt. I'm not going to say it was the easiest play. He was kind of in between it, but it is ruled an error. The ball does go under his glove, and Goldschmidt is pretty sure-handed. It doesn't make the play there. Makes it 5-3, and that would prove to be a very important run. Ian Hamilton comes in, gets the last two outs of the inning. Yankees again go down quietly in the seventh against Birdsong. And from there, in the eighth, it would be a combination of Hamilton and Hill. Hamilton with a couple of walks. He needs to, Hamilton, you can see the stuff looks pretty good, but the command hasn't been quite there since he's been back. So he's still trying to work his way back into the better part of the pecking order. But Tim Hill does a very, very good job. He gets a couple of big outs in that inning with a couple of runners on. Bottom of the eighth, Tyler Rogers, the submariner, the right-hander, allows a homer to Jazz Chisholm Jr., his fifth homer of the year. With Chisholm Jr., it's all or nothing. It's very disappointing. And Cody Bellinger, he's below 200, batting 196 with only a 549 OPS. That needs to improve drastically. And then Chisholm Jr., hopefully this home run can get him going, but he's swinging for the fences. And so that is, look, 5 home runs at this stage of the season. That's a high number, but he's only batting 169. So that cuts the deficit to 1. But then after that, 3 straight ground outs against Rogers for the Yankees. What was interesting is they had JC Escar hit for himself with 2 outs. I thought maybe they could have gone Wells, catcher for catch right there. I think Trent Grisham should be in that mix and conversation, but we haven't quite seen that from the Yankees. Maybe we will at some point. And then the 9th inning rolls around and Tim Hill is at it again. A couple strikeouts, 1, 2, 3 innings. So Hill 5 up, 5 down. And in the bottom of the 9th, San Francisco brings on their closer, Ryan Walker, and they pinch hit Wells for Cabrera, and Wells flies out. So they decide to go with Escara and Wells. They opt to pinch hit for Oswaldo against Girardi. And again, they don't use Grisham. So, it just interesting decisions to consider, in the future with the Yanks. But the umpire, who I thought did a really good job most of the game, bit of a tough call on Austin Wells at a 1-1 pitch that they called a strike that certainly could have been a ball, and eventually he flies out. Then Ben Rice grounds out where he helped the pitcher flat out. It was ball 4 by a mile, and he goes the other way with it. Matt Chapman was playing down the line, and he gets the ground out. So Rice needs to be patient there. And then Aaron Judge, on a 2-0 pitch, they call a low one. I mean, very low. That should have been 3-0. And at that point, changes the whole at bat. But give Walker credit, and Judge ends up striking out looking to end the game. You can't do that. You can't end the game with the bat on your shoulders. That's what happens, and the Yankees lose a game that they should have won 5-4. So now the homestand concludes with the Kansas City Royals, which is a playoff rematch from the ALDS last year. Kansas City comes in at 8-8. The Yankees won't face Cole Reagans, which I think is a good thing, considering he's one of the better lefties in the game. But Seth Lugo versus Carlos Carrasco in the first game, on paper, definite advantage to Kansas City, so don't love that one. Game 2 will be a matchup between Michael Wacha and Max Fried. And so that one you got to feel a little bit better about, certainly with Fried on the mound, the Yankee current number 1 in the rotation. And then the third game will be lefty Chris Bubich, who the Yankees saw last year out of the bullpen. But I guess he must be in the rotation here. And looking at the game logs, yeah, he's fully built up. He's actually pitched at least 6 innings in all 3 outings. So that's going to be a tough one too. Again, with him being a southpaw, I think the Yankees might have some troubles. But what's exciting is Clark Schmidt will make his debut this season. So, the rotation hopefully will be in a little bit of better shape. But Yankees will certainly be looking to win this series. You do not, in a 6-game homestand, want to go under 500. So looking to take 2 out of 3. And that's really all you're looking for at this point. Sweeps are great, but it's about, winning series. And the Yankees schedule at this point, while it hasn't been necessarily heavy hitter names, it has not been the easiest schedule at this point. But what's going to be interesting is once the Yankees start playing the division, which will happen soon, as after this Kansas City series, the Yankees will travel to Tampa at George M. Steinbrenner Field to take on the Rays. But for now, they'll stay at Yankee Stadium. And again, first rubber game of the season, the Yankees lose 2 of 3 to the San Francisco Giants.